Sky Park Avenue. Originally this was called Spring Street, mainly because of the springs that come out of the hill on the northern side here. Spring Street extended as far up as Clinton. It never went beyond Clinton. When that street was formed, it always was Sky Park Avenue from there on out. Eventually it became kind of silly to have part of the street one name, part of another, so the entire thing was changed to Sky Park Avenue. The top of Grant Place here.
Gary, you're in competition with the noise.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
That's good.
Thank you.
Alright.
Just want to make sure you guys are staying cool, that's all.
Yeah, we're fine.
At the top of Grant Place here, Wilbur H. Lynch Senior High School originally. Built in 1930. They replaced the 1904 high school on Division Street, which was being outgrown as the city rapidly got larger. It was built on top of the hill on a 7-acre site, which kind of stifled anything else being built up in that area for quite a while. Just for information purposes, there's 90 stairs that go up the front of it, because I walked up and counted them. It was named for the then superintendent of the schools, Wilbur H. Lynch. Class of 76 was the last one that graduated from it. The new high school opened in mid-77, and the first graduating class was 77 from up there. Right up here on the right-hand side, on the corner of Bayard, where the professional office building is, used to be Dr. Dunning in there. That was the location of the West Spring Street Elementary School, and that's where I went through 4th grade. There was an East Spring Street school at the other end of the street, so they had to change the name of West Springs. So this is West Spring Street here, and if you got the book, there is a picture of it in there. Because of the westward expansion of the city, this school was built here in 1885. It was torn down in the mid-60s when McNulty opened up on top of the hill up by the high school at that time.
That's why we do.
Mid-60s. You want to peek in here for just a minute? I just want to talk for a minute. There's a couple things in the area right here, and rather than try to unload people off the air-conditioned bus, I'd rather talk from here and mention them so as we go by. Northampton Road here originally was the Amsterdam and Fish House Road, and the reason it was called Fish House was that was the destination of the road. That eventually became Northampton, but the name Fish House came from the hunting lodge and fishing lodge that Sir William Johnson had established up in that area in 1762. In 1848, the Plank Road, Amsterdam Fish House Plank Road Company was established, and Thomas Bunn was the president. And you know, up on top of the hill, there's a Bunn Street, there's a Thomas Street. There used to be a Mary Street. That was his wife's name. It was changed to Trinity. That was originally Mary Street up there. But Thomas Bunn owned all the property up on top of the hill. It was a plank road being, they put down logs and then they laid basically a wooden road over the top of it with planks. It was a lot better to get your wagons over, it was a lot better for the horses, there wasn't mud to get bogged down in. It was originally 16 miles long, and then shortly after that part was completed, within the next couple of years they added another 6 miles and went all the way to Northville. It was a private toll road, and there were several toll gates on it, so it was kind of like the Jersey Turnpike. You go a few feet, they'd hit you with a toll. You go a few more feet, they'd hit you with a toll. It went from Guy Park, started right here, went up to the intersection of Market, or Route 30, up to Perth, Vale Mills, Broad Alban, out through Benedict's Corners to Fish House. It opened up this whole area for stage and mail connections to all the small villages and everything in the area, and it did a lot for the freight and commerce. The problem with the Plank Road is very high maintenance. After the first 3 or 4 years, when things started to rot out, we're a little before pressure-treated wood back then. Very high maintenance, you know, these horse steps in a hole, breaks his leg, and that's not good news, or you break a wagon wheel. They started to be displaced when roads started to have gravel put down on them, obviously. Rail lines started spreading out in other parts of the country, so plank roads kind of fell out of favor. Eventually, most of them were abandoned. Right up on the hill ahead of us there, and when we pull up, we can take a look at it better, is the Harrower Mansion. The Harrower Mansion was built, L.E. Harrower, about 1903, and this is Mr. Harrower who had the Anchor and Star Mills at Hageman. His grandfather was Henry Pauling up in Hageman, if you know the name Pauling. Yeah, in Pauling Hall up there. He also had the rural hosiery mill up in Harrowers, surprisingly enough, just outside of Mohawk Mills Park up there, outside of Shuttleworth Park. Beautiful Italian style house. He was also a bank officer at least 2 banks here in the city. Very well-to-do gentleman. He died in 1934 and the house passed into some private hands through the years. Early 1950s it became a ladies' convalescent home called The Lamp. And it was that until 1970, and since then it's been professional office space. This building we just passed, and I'm sorry to just get a little bit past it here, is the Emmanuel Presbyterian Church. This church opened in 1887, and it was opened because the the Presbyterian Church down on Church Street was getting a little big. So they split off and they felt that there was need for a church at the west end of the city to take care of the people at this end. So 44 people started this church up here. It was completed in 1888 at a cost of $18,000. And the $18,000 came from the insurance money of the fire that destroyed the first Presbyterian Church, which has been up in Manny's Corners. And that one was never rebuilt, so the church funds were used to build this church down here. By 1895, they had 116 adults, up from the 44, and 245 children in the Sunday school. So I think things have changed a little since those days. Over the course of time, was a decline in the congregation here, and in 1995, it merged with the Second Presbyterian Church and became the United Presbyterian Church. And this church building here was sold to the Hispanic Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is what it currently functions as. On the other side of the street here, we see Sarisha Park. And this was the original site of the Amsterdam City Hospital over here. This park was named after Frank Sarisha, and he had lived at 12 Bayard Street originally. He went into the Army in 1943, and through a strange set of circumstances ended up changing companies and being sent to England in August of '43. He landed with the D-Day troops in Normandy, and 10 days later he was killed in combat. The park was named in his honor. When the city hospital was torn down here in the 60s is when the park was put up, and that coincided with the same time that the West Spring Street School had been torn down, which eliminated any playground in the area up here. So consequently, it was decided this would serve as a good playground for the neighborhood. The Amsterdam City Hospital started up here. Actually, the original hospital building was facing Division Street. It was in a house owned by a gentleman named David Crane. And in 1889, the house was acquired to be used for what they called cottage hospital. And the feeling in the city was that they really needed a hospital because there was more and more industrialization, and with the railroads coming through and going faster and more railroad traffic, they really needed a place that could do emergency surgery and treat trauma injuries. It wasn't for disease purposes, it was mainly for accidents. The first hospital had 7 beds, and it cost you all $5 a week for room, board, and medical care. $10 if you wanted a private room. In 1890, there was an expansion put on it on this side towards the east. 1892, they opened a 2-year nursing program where the nurses worked basically for room and board, and they got $2 a week. They were sleeping in the attic of the building that was the hospital, so it wasn't the best of accommodations for their room and board. 1904, the East Pavilion was added right here to the hospital. And as soon as they opened this pavilion facing Guy Park Avenue, they immediately changed the address the same day to say that the hospital was on Guy Park Avenue and not on Division Street anymore. 1911, down where the handball court is down there, there was a nurses' home established called Sloan Hall, and that served until 1952 when the nurse training program was ended. In 1920, up at the far end of the park, the Blood Maternity Hospital was built, which was a separate building originally. Eventually the 2 of them were joined, forming like a U-shaped building here, but it went all the way back to Division Street also. In 1963, the hospital moved up on Route 30, became Amsterdam Memorial, And in 2009, it was merged with St. Mary's and became St. Mary's Healthcare in 2011.
You were born in this one?
Now, Guy Park Avenue here became the more fashionable section of the city to move to after Market Hill. Market Hill was originally, everybody lived downtown. The mansions and everything were downtown. As the city started to grow and more business went downtown, the mansions started to move up on Market Hill. And you saw your big houses up there. Well, eventually Market Hill kind of fell out of favor and people started to build on the boulevard, they called this. And this was all unimproved when they first built it in the early 1900s. But most of the homes you see along here, and if you have the tour book, there's a complete list of addresses, and I'm not about to start going through and telling you who lived in every one of them. But it's a real who's who of Amsterdam through here. Most of these houses here would be houses that belonged either to business or mill owners or to the upper executives. They could afford to live a little ways outside the city and commute to get into the city, so to speak, the city center. When we get up here, I'll point out a couple of the more notable names. The city was growing in this direction. The cities always seem to grow to the west, in the last direction to the west. My theory is that's because people don't like to drive into the sun when they're coming home from work, but I don't know if there's any truth to that or not. There was large tracts of land up here. They were owned by families with names like Carmichael and Stewart and Phillips. And if you know any of the streets in the area here, you'll recognize those names as being some of the people up here. Those large tracts were eventually divided up by the families. This house that we're coming up on here right now with a round porch on it, that belonged to John R. Blood, who was one of the major textile mill owners here in the city. And if you ever go to Fairview Cemetery, his crypt is that great big one on the right as you just go in. Most of these houses have been subdivided into numerous apartments, which is interesting because this is an R2 area, which means you're only supposed to have 2 families in a house. So there is some lack of code enforcement in some of these. So as you can see, you'll notice the streets here are Henrietta, Evelyn, Caroline. Those are names of Carmichaels, names of Stewarts, names of Phillips. Mostly family names, a little different style. It was an infill, apparently, possibly the house that was originally there probably burned down. Most of these houses had carriage houses in the back of them at one time.
Right. Yeah, down there up on the other side.
Yeah. Right behind us on the other side of the street, I'll just mention, is Guy Park Avenue School. That was built in 1902. Same concept as West Spring Street. The city was expanding to the west, and more people here, there's more children here. That was back when we had neighborhood schools that you used to go to. It housed Walter Irwin Museum for quite a while, and then when they moved out, and they moved in 2009 down to Guy Park Manor, this has been rehabbed now, and it is now an apartment complex. And they did a very nice job on it. They did a very nice job restoring it. Now right up here on the right side behind the stone walls are 2 homes, one of which was owned by Henrietta Stewart, and the other one was owned by Evelyn Stewart Phillips. They were both part of the families that owned the property up here. Both of these homes were built around 1903. Henrietta sold her house to Arthur Shuttleworth, and Evelyn sold her house to Herbert Shuttleworth. So the Shuttleworth family, at one time there was 5 families of Shuttleworths living on Upper Guy Park Avenue here. I don't think I would have wanted to be the mailman at that point. Beautiful homes.
In
A lot of things.
Now this next house we're going to be going up and slowing down by is David Chalmers. Now this is the David Chalmers who owned the knitting mill that was on the south side of the river. His claim to fame was Porous Knit. which was invented by one of the weavers who worked for him. It was a way to knit fabric such that it maintained small holes and allowed it to breathe. This is the Congregation Sons of Israel temple here. And this particular congregation can actually trace its roots back to the Wasserman family who came from Germany in the 1860s. The first permanent location that was established for the synagogue was on Grove Street. That was in 1908. There was a split in the congregation between the Orthodox Judaism and what was called Reform Judaism. Eventually they went their own ways, and in June of '77 this new synagogue was dedicated up here. They actually brought the stained glass windows from the building on Grove Street as a remembrance for the past and had them put in the building up here. This is the only conservative synagogue in Montgomery County, and it draws members from all around the Capital District. It's actually people come from Albany and Schenectady to come up here. If you were to go up Stedwell Avenue, which we're not going to do, but going up Stedwell Avenue is Sassafras and the Dove Creek. And if you've been in Amsterdam any period of time, you've heard Sassafras mentioned, I'm sure. It originally was opened in May of 1931, and it was privately owned by the Carmichael, Morris, and Sugden families. Again, well-known names in the history of the city. The Century Club and Walter Elwood were very instrumental in helping to establish a bird sanctuary in that area. These days, the only access you really have to it is from the Clara Bacon School area, and it hasn't fared too well over the past quite a few years. When I was in West Spring Street School down there, and I was in the Cub Scouts, we actually came up here on a field trip and worked on the bridges on it. I don't think anybody's worked on them since then. That was just a few years ago. Also at the top of the hill here is Fairview and St. Stanislaus cemeteries. Fairview and St. Stanislaus up on top of the hill. Fairview was actually 110 acres, and it was originally going to be a resort, and there was stock sold in it, and a gentleman from Troy was heading it up, and apparently his financial backing fell through, and the resort was never built. And in 1899 they decided they were going to turn it into a commercial cemetery. So the farm was converted over to a cemetery. Eventually it became a not-for-profit operation. But there's over 7,900 people interred in the cemetery at the top of the hill, so it is pretty large. We're just walking around there, again, as a who's who of the city and the history and the names that you find up there. St. Stanislaus February started out with 14.5 acres. In 1896, part of the Marcellus farm, and then named Marcellus, you're going to hear again in a minute here. And in 1858, they added the portion next to it there from the Morris farm that goes with it. And they are building a columbarium, I think is the right term for it, up there. So you can have your ashes in an urn put in there as an alternative to being buried. And it's the only one in the area. Behind me here is the medical building, and then just down a little ways, obviously, is St. Mary's Hospital. 1902, funds were raised by the members of the St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church, and they purchased the Marcellus Homestead, which is located here in the corner. And the Marcellus Homestead would have been right about where the end of that medical building is right now. And yeah, the cemetery is up on top of the hill behind it, was part of the Marcellus property. 1903, they opened a 27-bed hospital here. They had 5 sisters at St. Joseph Carondelet. They asked them to come in and operate the hospital for them. They had been instrumental in starting hospitals in 5 other areas in the country. And throughout the years, the hospital grew a wing at a time. One of the postcards, if you're back at the if you go inside when you go back, one of the postcards that we did this year is a reproduction of an antique postcard that shows the original Marcellus home with the first wing that was added to the back of it. The home faced the street, the wing actually ran back 90 degrees to the road here. It expanded throughout the years, as I said, quite a few times. In 1921, they opened the nursing school across the street here, and that closed in 1988. 1980, they opened this new building, and the old building was torn down to provide room for parking, for the most part, a little bit of the medical building there. They expanded again in 93. They added to their outpatient services. They added to the emergency department, and they added that entranceway there with a glass staircase and everything to it on this side. As I said, in 2009, in June, they merged with the Amsterdam Memorial, and in 2011 became St. Mary's Healthcare. We have the author of the article in our write-up with us here, so correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Going. But this was presented to the city in November of 1925, and according to the sources I found, the original park was built using unexpended funds from the World War I war chest, the monies that have been collected here in Amsterdam for the benefit of the veterans. The monument itself was a $35,000 work, and it was done by Hennessy, which was local stone mason. They were down on Railroad Street in Amsterdam. Originally, again, this field gun that sits here is a piece of American artillery. Originally, there was a large captured German gun there, which fell to the World War II scrap drives, and was subsequently replaced by this to the grousing of many people, according to the newspaper articles that I read. This whole area here was originally called the Ashley Triangle. The family that owned the property, their name was Ashley, and there was a hotel right up here on the right-hand side, which is quite a popular social place, hence the Ashley Triangle. The fountain and the extra lighting here was added a few years ago to enhance the park. Right across the way over there was the Claus Mansion, and in 1762 Sir William Johnson gave that property to his daughter Nancy and her husband. They picked the wrong side during the Revolution, had to hightail it out of here, and actually the place was burned. So it didn't pay to be a Tory. Similar to Guy Park Manor, when we get down there, they got a square mile of property here. The other daughter and husband got a square mile of property just down where Guy Park Manor is. Their house didn't get burned during the Revolution, but they had some other issues. Okay. Head down by the brewery maybe. Okay. Next place we stop, I'm going to start just a little bit early talking about it, because when we get down there, I think you can move off on our side of it. Yeah. We're going down by Bowler's Brewery. Unfortunately, it's not in operation.
Getting off the bus.
Well, we gotta take care of it.
Believe me, we've talked about getting a microbrewery in here.
That would be great.
Yeah.
I don't agree.
Harry Bowler was one of the three sons of a gentleman named Henry Bowler, who originally came from Ipswich, England. He and his two brothers all started breweries. His two brothers were in Massachusetts. Harry came to Amsterdam. Why? I have absolutely no idea. Originally, he had been in Troy. The reason the brewery is where it is that there was a very good spring located on this property, and there's some question as to the actual name of the spring, which we tried to do some research on. Some sources say it was called the Mohegan Spring. Some sources say it was called the Mohawk Spring, although there was a Mohawk Spring Water Company a little further up Henrietta, and there's another spring up there, so that's still a point of contention as to what it was actually called. The brewery itself, originally, he opened the brewery, he bought the land in 1889 and the rights to the spring for 99 years, and he opened an ale brewery with a capacity of 10,000 barrels, which sounds like a pretty good sized brewery. It was a wooden two-story structure. By 1894, he had to expand because he couldn't keep up with the demand. Apparently, their product was quite popular. As soon as they got the new place built, September of that year, it burned to the ground. Yeah, you can still see the signs on it. As long as I've lived in Amsterdam, which has been 59 years, I've driven by and seen those signs painted on that building. As soon as the Embers were cool from his 1894 brewery, they started to work on this 4-story brick building, which opened in 1895. This one had 5 times the capacity of the original brewery. So this is a 50,000 barrel capacity on this brewery. And again, they were very popular. They did very well. I have some pictures showing the rail cars lined up on the siding that used to be right here in front of the building with the company stencils on the side of the rail cars. So they're shipping it out by rail car loads. Unfortunately, in 1919, somebody got the idea that alcohol wasn't good for you, and they passed something called the Volstead Act. So Prohibition kind of put them out of business here. There's an urban legend that there is a tunnel extending from the basement of this brewery under Carmichael Street and into the basement of the garage behind it, which is now Dudka's, which at the time was Lehman's Trucking, long-distance trucking company. So I can actually understand why you may want to have a tunnel over to a trucking company where you could just bring things in through the basement, load a truck, and drive away with it. But I can't say one way or the other. It is interesting. I found some newspaper articles from 1920 saying that the brewery would be back in operation on January of 1920 with a full force of men, and they were producing 8% beer. And they were doing that because there was a federal judge ruling that said you could produce alcoholic drinks for medicinal purposes if you had a permit from the state. But only one druggist in the city could sell it. So by the time the ruling came down, they only had 24 hours left to get their permits they needed. An agent from the brewery and a druggist from the East End, and I don't remember the gentleman's name, hightailed it down to Albany, got their permits that day before the window expired, and they were qualified to sell alcohol in the city. The interesting thing was there was no limit on how much your doctor could prescribe for you. The brewery actually reopened again in 1933 under the name Amsterdam Brewing Company and operated until 1940. 1940 was also some indication that it operated under the name of Emerald Ale, but it also closed that year, so obviously it didn't operate very successfully. Since that time, there's been a number of businesses in here. The one you may remember is Northeast Stained Glass, which was in here for a long time, producing Tiffany lamps. This corner was originally the JL and GS Banta Shoddy Mill. And what shoddy was basically recycled fiber. Hence, we get the term shoddy work, because it's not new stuff, it's not real good stuff, it's recycled. But a shoddy mill was a legitimate business, and there were several of them around here. That was subsequently replaced by the Consolidated Wool and Felt Mill, which owned this half of the block here. That burned down in 1911, and when that burned down, Bowlers ended up owning the whole block after that. And what I'd like to do is we're gonna pull in the parking lot over here, and we are gonna get out and tour the firehouse, but I'd like to let them get out of there first so we don't overcrowd things. So if you'll indulge me, I'll talk to you a little bit about the trolley system here in the city. 1873, Amsterdam took its first steps into public mass transit. Actually, those steps were taken by a horse. 1873, it was a horse car railway. It was basically a trolley car that was pulled by a horse. It ran up Main Street from the area of Eagle Street, went up Market, and then turned and came over Division and came up this way, stopped on Division Street between Bayard and Clinton Street. It was 1.5 miles long. It took 20 minutes to make the trip one way, and it would cost you all of 3 cents to take that ride. 6 cents if you wanted to go round trip, but you better have 40 minutes available because they had to take the horse off on one end of the car, walk him around the other. There's no way to turn the car. The late 1880s saw a lot of advances in technology, both in steam and electricity for powering vehicles and machinery. And it was really to the advantage of the operators to try to find something other than animals to run it, because animals are very high maintenance when it comes to something like that. They eat a lot, and of course if they eat a lot, they do something else a lot, and you got to take care of all that. And that ends up over the streets, and also you have to have people to take care of the animals, you have to stable them. So if they get tired, you have to change them out. What do you change them out with? Another animal, that one's going to get tired. Electric motors and steam engines don't have those problems. They have other problems, but they don't have those problems. So they don't have nearly as much downtime or as much upkeep as an animal. So in 1890, the Amsterdam Street Railway was granted the right to go electric. Their application was approved to change over to electric power. That same year, it was also sold by the local owners here to a group out of New York City and Philadelphia, a group of financiers. In their day, electric railways were kind of like the dot-coms. Everybody wanted to get in on the ground floor. That was the new thing. It was the best thing. People just threw money at it. They wanted to invest in it. It was the way things were going. So we got a new infusion of money coming in. So they started making a few changes. They ran a line from the intersection of Division and Market. They extended the line up Market Hill to the top of Meadow Street, up on top of the hill. They didn't run any service on it, they just put the line in until they could get the electrical part put in. And they went about putting up the poles and the wires. And if you've ever seen any pictures of the trolley system, you know the sky is just black with wires anywhere you got a trolley, especially where they make curves and corners and stuff. December 17th, 1890, the first trolley moved down Division Street under electric power. That was the first electric-powered trolley to operate in Amsterdam. On January 15th, the first trolley ran up Market Hill under electric power. And it took it 2 or 3 times to get up the hill, but it was January and the tracks were a little icy, so they had to have the ice chipped off and put down some sand, but they did make it, which proved that it was viable. It was interesting also because Market Hill was the sharpest grade of any trolley line in New York State at 14%. That means every 100 feet you go, you got to raise 14 feet, and that's quite a feat to do. You can't do that on a regular railroad, but electric streetcars had the capability to maneuver on some steeper grades like that. In 1891, they extended from down on Bayard Street, which is where they had their car house and a barn for the horses and another building for the workers. It's still a vacant lot down there, just past Bosco's actually. In 1891, on the other corner from here, opposite this building, on the other corner where it's empty over there now, they built a car barn exclusively for the electric cars. And it was called the Pavilion. The upstairs was pretty much a big open dance hall. It was used for social events, and a lot of articles I've read on the thing, the catch line is that the bells of Amsterdam danced above while the bells of the trolleys clanged below. That seems to be everywhere in every article you read. By 1893, they extended the track on up to Fort Johnson to a place called Aiken Park. It was a small 3-acre picnic area and a dance pavilion. They had band concerts there. It was owned by the railroad, which is not uncommon. A lot of these trolley lines owned what they called trolley parks. And it was a reason for people to travel there and a reason for them to collect fares for the people that traveled there. So they'd provide a park for free for these people to go to, and the people would pay the fares to get there. So it worked out very well. It was very popular with the people. It was very popular with the railroad. In 1900, we got back to local ownership when the Fonda Johnstown and Gloversville Railroad bought the interest in the Amsterdam Street Railroad. They already had the Cayadetta railroad that was operating the trolley systems in Johnstown and Gloversville down in the Fonda. FJ&G had in their mind eventually that they wanted to get connected to Amsterdam. But a little beyond that, they also had in their mind they wanted to get connected to Schenectady, because that's where they saw the money, was intermediate travel down to Schenectady. In 1901, they extended the line to Rockton from the top of Meadow Street. Took off at a 45-degree angle, ran through where the gas station is now, went across Harmon Field, which is the former playground there at the bottom of Brookside, on 2 recycled bridges that the railroad bought used. Then ran up Brookside Avenue around the curve at the top of the reservoir up there, which was known as Lookout Point. A lot of famous postcards of that. Past the fire station at the top of the hill, and down Lion Street where it stopped at Forest Avenue. So that was the Rockton extension. 1902 on the other side of the car barn. Oh, excuse me. 1902. 1901, in addition to building the the pavilion was built in 1891. 1901, they replaced it with a new car barn. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. This new car barn was brick and steel, and it ran the entire length of the block over there. They also built, on the other side of that, they also built a warehouse and an office building. So there's 3 buildings here, eventually. This building wasn't here at the time. They also built a track on West Main Street, in addition to the one here on Division Street, which kind of gave them a loop. It came off the line at the point up there, went down West Main, rejoined at the corner of Market and Main. So it gave them a loop here that they could run on. And then once they had that, then it was convention that they go eastbound on Division and westbound on West Main. So the way the cars would run. 1902, they also extended the line to Hegeman. And the FJ&G made their connection to Aiken Park. So now they could run trolley lines, run trolleys from Johnstown to Gloryville to Amsterdam. They finally had the physical connection that they wanted. They also installed a track running up this block of Henrietta here, right next to the car barn, to help them move cars around here. In 1903, they completed 2 major projects. They completed the double interurban line, which ran all the way to Schenectady, actually joined with the Schenectady Railway in Scotia. But that gave them interurban service down to General Electric, the area down there. These big interurban cars hit 60 or 70 miles an hour going down the valley. It was very rapid transit, very plush cars. They had steam heat, they had ice water, they had bathrooms on the cars. Some of them had separate smoking compartments. They were very plush. And they were fast. They also got some concessions from the city because they wanted to double track East Main Street. And the concessions that they got from the city were that they had to sprinkle the streets more often, so they bought a sprinkler car. I'm not sure I want to ride on a tank of water with a wire bringing 600 volts DC current over my head. And they also had to extend service to the south side. Well, the service to the south side, they put the tracks in the bridge when it was built in 1916, but they were never used, they were never connected. And when they tore the bridge down in 1973, when they ripped the decking off the bridge, I have a photo that shows the tracks there that have never seen the light of day since 1916 when they were first put in. In 1910, they added a belt line. The belt line went up Roman Avenue, wound its way through the hill, across Church Street, up Forest Avenue, and through an area that was being developed up there, a lot of property which was owned by the people that owned McClary Wallen and Krause Mills up at the top of the hill there. So it was to boost realty property as much as anything else. It was never a popular line. Matter of fact, eventually the bottom of the line they had to change it. Roman Avenue was so steep. They ran it over Forbes Street and brought it down by Lark Street. They did pretty good through World War II. By the time they got after World War I, after that, things started to change with more cars. They started to see some competition coming in from the buses. The laws were changed that allowed the trolley companies to actually operate buses now also if they could show that it was in the interest of the public. And FJ&G jumped on the bandwagon right away. It was getting very expensive to maintain a system the size that they did. And it was a lot safer to get on and off your conveyance at the curb than it was in the middle of the street with all the traffic going by, which had to be a problem. eventually they got to the point where it just didn't pay anymore to run the system. They started breaking it up and abandoning it piece by piece. The Belt Line, which was never popular, never made any money, they closed that in 28. They closed the Hegeman Line in 36 because of very low ridership. And finally, by 38, June 38, they shut down everything. The car barn over on the far corner there was used as a bus garage by Mohawk Valley Transit until November of '59 when it went up in a spectacular fire, one of the largest ones in the area. The office building on the other side, which used to be Montgomery Electric, that burned in December of '73. And the building right next to us here was actually the substation for Amsterdam, which converted the power coming in from the power plant up in Tribes Hill, 25,000 volts AC to 600 volts DC for the trolleys to operate on. This building right here burned in October of '68, and it was rebuilt. And if you look in there, and if you have the book, you'll see there's pictures of the substation with a peak roof on it. That's originally his building, but after the fire, it was rebuilt with a flat roof. If you do look at the book, you'll notice in the back, at the end of the article there's a section that talks about relics and remnants and tells you where to look in the city for things that are still left of the trolley system. And it's just like a scavenger hunt someday. I see they left across the street, so why don't we try to get over there and take a look at them.
It's a pool here.
Yeah. Really? Because we figured that was the tour, the outer one. So he ran to Stewart's to get a sandwich because we were like starving.
Well,
Yes, I remember those
I
amazing.
still think they're going to come through the Florida Mall someday down there. So this was the car barn right here, went the whole length. You can see that's kind of the foundation there. And then right next to it was the office building that burned down. Up until 2 years ago, you could see 4 sets of tracks coming out of Division Street and going into that empty lot where they went into the car barn. But they tore this whole block out and redid it. And they're all gone now. We'll do a drive-by on Guy Park Manor since we really can't get in to see it much anymore. 1763, Guy Johnson, who was Sir William Johnson's nephew, married Sir William Johnson's daughter. We still haven't figured that whole relationship out. He married his own cousin is what it came down to. They called her Polly, her name was Mary. And just like his daughter Nancy got a square mile of property up there, Mary and her husband got a square mile of property down here. The first house that was built on this location was hit by lightning and it burned in 1773. And they, the stone house was rebuilt. Obviously, you know, it got damaged in the floods of Irene and Lee a couple years ago. 1775, the family fled to Canada in first shots of the revolution, so to speak, since they were British supporters. Property was confiscated, went through several hands. At one time, it was a tavern and a stage stop. The property was broken up and sold. A lot of it was sold off to the railroad when they came through. The Utica and Schenectady was the railroad that went through. A gentleman by the name of Stewart bought it in 1846 and added the 2 wings to the sides of it. He was killed by one of the trains running through his front yard in 1860. 1907, the state bought it when they were putting in the barge canal, locks and dam there. 1921, the Daughters of the American Revolution bought it. It was used for a museum for a number of years. 1880s, the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce headquarters was there until 2007. Then 2009, Walter Elwood moved in there and stayed there until the floods came in 2011. Right now, the Canal Corporation is looking at it for possible headquarters. But they got to get the building fixed up first. The west end of the city here, if you're familiar with Amsterdam, you've obviously heard of Isabel's and Pep's restaurants. A couple of hangouts that were here. We just came by where Isabel's used to be. Pep's is right up here. Fine Italian food. What's that?
A bakery that's also here somewhere. Tina's here. Tina's.
Peps is over the river. Oh, Peps over the river. Peps is over the river. Tina's down here.
Bakery. Pep's restaurant is right up here.
It's a different feeling, believe it or not.
Yeah. And you can still see on the left side there, it's still the Pep's Pizza parking sign is still up there. I spent many a Friday night down here eating pizza when I was in high school. This building right here with the gray front on it was Pep's. Oh yeah, 218. Right down here on the
There was the, no, that was the Democratic Witnesses.
down here on the right-hand side, the building is Burmaster's. Originally, that was part of the Spartan Knitting Mills. They used to be located down there. Just past them a little bit further down, about where the ramp is there, there was another knitting mill, which was the Atlas Knitting Mills. So, anywhere you went in the city, you had mills. The only place that really escaped pretty much was there's still, in some cases, mills in there, but it was empty. There's one on Division Street up there, Gardner and Waring knitting mills that we came by. That's that smokestack that's sticking up in the middle of the residential area back there. Right on this corner up here, corner of Cedar Street, was the Pioneer Broom Factory. So everywhere you went, we had mills in the city. Anybody here ever heard of John Arthur Manning? That house directly in front of us on Guy Park, that green house up there?
Yeah.
John Arthur Manning was a musician. His hobby was photography. And when he went out to play at a dance or when he went out to some engagement in another town or something, he always took his big box camera with him. I think there were 5-inch glass negatives. And he'd take pictures. When Mr. Manning passed away and his house was cleaned out, there were several boxes put out on the curb for the trash. A gentleman by the name of Bob Fonda, who used to have a bike shop down here, if you remember Mr. Fonda, decided to look and see what was in the boxes, and there were all these boxes of glass negatives. So he took them off the curb and he put them in his garage over there. He used to be right over there where that new building is. And they sat there until Mr. Fonda passed away. And his kids started cleaning out the garage and found all these boxes of glass negatives, realized what they were, and gave them to Montgomery County Department of History and Archives. So we have all John Manning's photographs. And probably when you see a postcard of anything around the Amsterdam area, about a 75% chance that that postcard came from a picture that John Arthur Manning took. The man was prolific, and without him we wouldn't have most of the pictures of Amsterdam from the early 1900s that we have. Folks, thank you so much for your time today. I'm glad you came. I appreciated it. I enjoyed talking to you. And thank you very much. If you'd ever like to come to one of our meetings, Historic Amsterdam League, we have quarterly meetings. Check out our website. The schedule's on there, historicamsterdam.org. You're more than welcome anytime to come to a meeting, and we'd love to have you join us as a member. We've got some very interesting projects. One of the things we're working on is right now we're trying to get going on getting the clock going up on top of Sanford Mills. So, welcome to City Hall. So thanks again.